Hello students, welcome back to today's English language class. In our previous class, we had learned what phrases are. In today's class, we'll learn what clauses are. We learn to identify main and dependent clauses, and we'll also try to understand what adjective, adverb and noun clauses are. So let's get started. To start with, what a clause is. A clause, we know, is a group of words, as I had explained to you in our previous class. It is a part of a sentence, and a clause must have a subject and a predicate and at least one verb. These are the prerequisites of a clause. It is a group of words. It is a part of a sentence. It must have a subject and a predicate and at least one verb. Okay? At least one verb should be there in a clause. Let us take an example. You must wait here until I return. In this particular sentence, you must wait here until I return. You'll find that this sentence has got two clauses. One is you must wait here. This is the main clause of the sentence. Until I return becomes the subordinate or dependent clause. Now you must wait here. If you analyze this part of the sentence, you is the subject, must wait is the verb, and if we divide the sentence into subject and predicate, this clause rather into subject and predicate, you becomes the subject and must wait here becomes the predicate. So this clearly shows that the clause has a subject, it has a predicate and it also has a verb. So this has met all the conditions of a clause. This part therefore is called the main clause because it has an independent meaning of its own. It makes a complete sense. Even if we exclude this part of the sentence, you must wait here itself makes a complete sense. So this is called the main clause of this sentence. Now coming to the next portion, until I return is a subordinate or dependent clause. This also has a subject. Return is the verb, but you'll find here that this part of the sentence does not make a sense of its own. Therefore, until I return is a subordinate or dependent clause. This is how we identify subordinate or main clauses in a sentence. A sentence may have one main clause and it may have one or more than one subordinate clauses. Now let us consider the differences between a phrase and a clause. Now that you have known the basics of what a phrase is and what a clause is, let us once just recap the difference between a phrase and a clause. A phrase does not have a subject or a predicate. We have learned this. It is only a group of words which will have the head word as the adjective, may have a head word as the noun, may have a head word as an adverb, a preposition or a verb, but this group or this chunk of words does not contain subject or predicate. In contrast to this, a clause will have a subject and a predicate. We have learned this just now. A phrase may not have a verb. I have written here may not because it is only the verb phrase which has a verb, which will contain a verb. But apart from the verb phrase, no other phrases, be it adverb, adjective, noun, will contain any verb. But a clause must have at least one verb. A phrase makes no sense by itself. That's true, isn't it? A phrase, if we take that group of words and we try to analyze if there is any meaning implied by that group of words, we find that it makes no sense without being used, if it is not used in relation to the other words or the other part of the sentence. Independent or main clauses make a complete sense, just like we have learned in the previous example. Independent clause or main clause does make a complete sense. A phrase cannot stand by itself. It cannot stand by itself because it needs the help of the other words of the sentence or the other parts of the sentence in order to complete its meaning. Vis-a-vis, an independent or main clause can stand by themselves because they make a complete sense. They make a complete meaning. So these are the differences between a phrase and a clause. The basic differences. This is mentioned in your textbook, page number 166. Mark that portion as important, and whenever you are confused with what a phrase and clause, refer back to these differences. You'll be clear about the differences between a phrase and a clause. Now coming to the different types of clauses. One, we have already learned: independent, main or principal clause. Another is dependent or subordinate clause. Okay, look at this example mentioned here. The boys will not go out to play if it rains. This sentence has got clearly a main clause and a subordinate clause in it. The boys will not go out to play. This portion of the sentence is the main clause. If it rains is the subordinate clause. The boys subject will not go out to play is the predicate. Will go out is again a verb here. Will go is a verb. So this meets the condition of a clause, and this also makes a sense of its own. So this is the main clause. And if it rains is the subordinate clause, because this part is dependent on the main clause for the completion of its meaning. Now coming to the different types of clauses, this is the basic difference. Now adjective, adverb and noun clause is always a subordinate clause, children. This is what you have to remember. A main clause cannot be an adverb clause or an adjective clause or a noun clause. It is always the subordinate clause which is a type of any of these clauses. Either it will be an adverb clause or it will be an adjective clause or a noun clause. So keep this very clear in your mind. A subordinate clause will begin with a subordinate conjunction, like you can see here. If is a subordinate conjunction, and if it rains is the subordinate clause beginning with the subordinate conjunction. And this subordinate clause can be identified as either adjective, adverb or noun clause. We will learn to identify these subordinate clauses correctly as either of these. This is what is important for us to learn in the entire clauses chapter. Let's now understand what an adjective clause is, an adverb clause, and what a noun clause is. An adjective clause, remember children, plays the role of an adjective in the dependent clause. Like I told you, these types of clauses will only be present in the subordinate clause or the dependent clause. So an adjective clause plays the role of an adjective in a sentence. Now what does an adjective do? An adjective qualifies the noun, right, or adds meaning to the noun. So keep this in mind and then identify the adjective clause. Look at the sentence. The man who came to meet the principal was my uncle. So the man who came to meet the principal was my uncle. How do you identify the adjective clause here? First of all, we find out the subordinate clause. Which is the subordinate clause in this sentence? Who came to meet the principal. Why is this a subordinate clause? Because this clause begins with the subordinate conjunction who. So this is a clear indication that the subordinate clause is this part because it begins with the subordinate conjunction who. The rest, the man was my uncle, which makes a clear sense is our main clause. Now this subordinate clause is an adjective clause here because this entire subordinate clause plays the role of an adjective. We find it qualifies or adds meaning to the noun the man. The man who came to meet the principal. Isn't this part speaking something about the noun here, about the man here? Therefore, this is the adjective clause in the sentence. I hope it is clear. First of all, you will identify the subordinate clause. You will identify the subordinate clause with the help of the subordinate conjunction. Once you know where the subordinate conjunction is, you will understand the subordinate clause begins from that part. Now, identify the main clause also. Be very clear about that. Once that is done, now identify what role does the subordinate clause play in the sentence. Is it playing the role of an adjective or is it playing the role of an adverb or of that of a noun? Now, if it is playing the role of an adjective, it will add meaning to the noun. That is what adjective does. Like in this sentence, this subordinate clause adds meaning to the noun the man. Therefore, this is clearly an adjective clause. This is how you will identify clauses, the types of clauses. Now, look at this adverb clause. Similarly, adverb clause also does the role of an adverb in the subordinate clause. Now, role of an adverb. What does an adverb do? An adverb adds meaning to the verb, to an adjective or to another adverb. Now, adverb clause, I tell you children, is a little tricky because under adverb clause we have many other types of adverbs coming in. Like the adverb clause may indicate time, the adverb clause may indicate place, it may indicate some condition, it may indicate contrast, it may indicate manner, the adverb of manner or the adverb of quality. Hence, the adverb clause is a little vast one and you have to keep in mind all those types of adverbs when you identify the adverb clause. Let's now consider another sentence. Everyone knows where the thief is hiding. Okay, first of all, we will identify the subordinate clause. Which is the subordinate clause? Beginning with the subordinate conjunction. Where the thief is hiding. So, we have clearly got our subordinate clause here. Everyone knows becomes our main clause. Now, where the thief is hiding here, since it begins with where, this is clearly an adverb of place. So, we get here adverb of place. Therefore, this is clearly an adverb clause. Fine. This is how you may have sentences where you may find adverb of contrast, you may find adverb of concession, you may find adverb of time, adverb of degree, you may find adverb of say condition. Okay. So you have to keep that in mind when you are identifying adverb clauses. Now noun clause, role of a noun in the subordinate clause, just like the other two, the noun clause also plays the role of a noun in the subordinate clause. Look at this sentence. That he is an honest man is known to all. The sentence begins with a subordinate conjunction that. So that he is an honest man. This entire part is the subordinate clause. What is known to all? What does a noun do? A noun stands for a thing, isn't it? Therefore, like I told you during an adverb, when we did a noun, when I was explaining to you a noun phrase should be replaced with something or ask question with what. Now, something is known to all. So, what is known to all? That he is an honest man. Therefore, this part is our noun clause. Always replace the noun clause or the noun phrase with something or ask question with what, when you get this part as the answer, that becomes your noun phrase or noun clause. So what is known to all? That he is an honest man. This clearly is our noun clause. I hope you have understood this, children. We will continue with the rest of the part of the chapter in our next video, and rest of the explanation will follow in our live class. Thank you so much. Have a nice day, children. Bye bye.